After a few days, that worried me because surely it was not one of our chaps who dropped a bomb on that town. It would have been a terrible thing to do. That crash, which I thought was a bomb, must have landed on some children, parents, grandmothers, you know. Yeah. It wasn't worth that. And then on the first trip, they were shot down into the sea, but they all got rescued. Amazing, isn't it?
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lights, Camera, Combat podcast. The podcast where we talk to incredible people with inspirational stories from a life in connection to combat and shine a light on it. Over the course of this series, I'm sitting down with veterans turned TV presenters, incredible athletes and even some World War II veterans to help you and hopefully me find the light at the end of any tunnel. Now today's episode is a very, very special one, and it follows on from the documentary that we dropped in commemoration of the 80th anniversary of VE Day. This is an interview that was recorded about a year ago or so, before the creation of the podcast and before it took its form today. And there's a sit-down interview with the main character of yesterday's documentary, a man called Ray Parke. If you haven't checked out the documentary yet, I would urge you to do that either now, before you listen to this interview, or at the end of this interview, because there's so many hours of hard work and dedication that have gone into the documentary to create it and produce what it is now, and we're incredibly proud of it. So do go and check that out. It's 23 minutes and it's an incredible story. Ray was a 99-year-old World War II Lancaster bomber veteran. He flew over 40 sorties in his bomber over Nazi-occupied Germany and the Netherlands, and he's somebody that I developed a very close personal relationship with, became a good friend of mine despite our nearly 80-year age gap. Very sadly, in January of this year, Ray passed away, and the documentary and this interview as well is a really great opportunity for us to be able to continue his legacy, as well as the legacy of all the others in his generation. It is an incredible honour for us to share this episode with you today. As I say, whether now or at the end of this episode, please do go and check out the documentary. It is well worth the watch. But for now, wherever you are, however you listen, please sit back and enjoy this episode with the remarkable World War II hero, Ray Parke. So, Ray, I want you to sort of start at the early years in your life and talk to me about your friendship growing up with David.
As a schoolboy, I was brought up in Thorpe St Andrew, close to Norwich, and as usual, you get amongst a gang of fellow pupils, and I was particularly friendly with one, David Dow, and it came that Delhi wanted some information about the war memorial, and I was able to give him his name, and that was a contact he made. And it turned out that, quite unbeknown to both of us, our careers went off in the same way, but we didn't know anything about either of them. We both left school. We were in a choir at church and down there, all that sort of thing. And one day, just one day, he'd gone, and I learned that he'd volunteered to join the Air Force. He was a few months older than me, and from there on, I heard nothing more for a long, long time. Time came for me. I got a bit older. I was 17 years old. It was the dumb thing, brokering boys, all the rest of it, and I volunteered for our RAF, you see. And then we came to deciding what I wanted to do in the RAF, and I because of my overweight, I couldn't be an air gunner. I couldn't get in the turret. They said, well, do you want to do wireless operators? And it was too difficult for me. I can't understand that. Do you want to do this? But would you like to be an engineer? I like being it, but I don't know anything about it. And it came about that I was posted to St Athens in South Wales about that. And you were first interviewed, and the first interview I had was, what did you know about engines? So I said, I haven't got a motorbike, I haven't got a motor car, I know nothing about it at all. So they said, well, can you describe to me a cotter pin? I said, yes, of course I can. I had two on my bike. And unbeknownst to me, it was a totally different thing what he was talking about. Now that cotter pin has come to life now in my later career as a part of the book, and even George Hayes, who flies a Spitfire, he wears a replica of it. Yeah, and there's so much. Anyway, I've gotten on too far. So it seems that we follow the same course. RAF St Athens training for flight engineer, and I would be a year or two, or a few months behind him. We knew nothing about that. He qualified, I qualified. He went off to a squadron, which was a crew from New Zealand. Is it right? New Zealand? Australia, New Zealand. And I went off to a squadron with an Australian pilot, with a West Indian rear gunner, and I was 17 years old. After that, you go on and you do your training and you fly into Hawaii. Now, on my first occasion flying, we were all a crew of 17, 18-year-old, all novices completely, and the trip was to a place called Duisburg in Germany, just over the River Rhine. And they said this was a special trip. There'd be a first 1,000-bomber raid. So we thought, well, that's good. We'll just follow the others. and we took off. And you had to maintain silence over the RT as far as you possibly could, so you couldn't really chat over. After we'd been flying for a couple of hours or so, the radio operator got fed up with nothing to do, so he stood up into the dome of the Lancaster and looked around, and he said, I thought there was supposed to be another 1,000 buggers around here flying, and we couldn't see a thing. And the short answer is, of course, we'd lost ourselves on our first trip, and there was a 17-year-old flying around Germany in the middle of the day, lost completely. So that was a good start. Things like that happened throughout that. I mean, some were good, some were bad, some were terrible, some weren't so bad. And
when you first started, your training, and then you first were out in the plane, did you have any specific views on the war at the time, and an outlook on what was going on? Were you passionately wanting to get involved?
No, it was as I say, 17-year-old, that was the thing to do. Broken boys and all that sort of thing. And that's what people were doing.
So it was just almost like the expectation.
Yes.
That's what you just do.
That's right. Yeah.
So staying in with now getting into talking about the missions and stuff that you were doing. Do you have any particular memories of? You flew over 40 missions, obviously, in a short space of time.
I'll tell you about the mission that the wing commander was telling you about to Netherlands. It was 25th of October 1944. It was about our third or fourth operation. Clear blue skies, not a wind, not a cloud, not a breath of wind. And they said, oh, you'll be all right, it's a short trip, you'll be back home in time for lunch. And so we thought that's good. The target was the German works on the island of Walsall, on which they were bolstering up for defence. And we did the raid, and we got good results. And the time came to return, to come back home. And to do that, we had to fly inland a little bit before we could turn and come back over the sea. And the route took us over a place called Middleburg, which actually had been the subject of a lot of the raids in the 2 previous days, which I knew nothing about. As we turned to come back, there was a tremendous explosion which really shook our plane up completely. We happened to be just right over where it happened, and so there you saw all this terrific crash and flames and black smoke and all that sort of thing. But we had to go on, keep out of the way. So we went on, we turned around, came back, and we did get our Sunday lunch. Then after a few days, that worried me, because surely was not one of our chaps who dropped a bomb on that town. It would have been a terrible thing to do. And I couldn't get over that for a long, long time. But I learned much later in life that what happened was a Lancaster had been badly damaged over the target, struggled on to where we were and just crashed down into the town. And that Lancaster was a Pathfinder plane with a crew, seven or eight members, all about the same age as my crew. And they survived. I survived, they didn't survive. And so when I got the news that it wasn't our fault, I was so much relieved about it. And that's what came about recently with the presentation. Yeah.
How did that make you feel when you mention things like that, you know, you and all your crew survived, and there were people that, you know, you might have seen just before you go up in the plane that don't make it back? How does that feel, especially in the mind of a 17, 18-year-old lad?
I remember one occasion, I can't remember which one it was, but after we flew, we came back, we debriefed and went to bed. And the next morning, we woke up and the rest of the hut was empty. Crew gone.
Wow. Yeah. When you think about that now, you can see that still hits you as though that only just happened.
That's right. Yeah. There were good things about it all. Sometimes we were very lucky, sometimes we weren't so lucky, but we survived and we got through.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a little bit about Dresden.
Yeah.
What are your personal recollections of that experience?
That was later on in the number of trips we did. So far as I was concerned, I was told that the Russians were advancing, and the raid was to help the way for them to advance further. And my part in it was just to fly to get there, and it was a tremendous raid. It was really a firestorm, and something you never forget. Lots of aircraft lost. But then there was a hurrah after the event. that had we gone too far? And that is a question which I'm often asked now. Did we go too far with the bombing offensive? I still can't make up my mind properly.
Why do you think that is?
Why
in your mind?
Well, I think going back to that little trip over Middleburg, that crash, which I thought was a bomb, must have landed on some children, parents, grandmothers, you know.
Yeah.
It wasn't worth that. As I say, that wasn't our fault. And later on, the people say, well, the Bomber Command did too much. They saturated bombing. I still feel it's necessary, and I think we did the right thing to do. You know.
You say that's obviously one of the later missions. The longer the time went on that you went up in the planes, did you feel more confident, or did you have the same feeling every time you went up in the plane?
We had a reputation on the squadron of being a mad crew, and that comes from our pilot, who was an Australian. And everybody would say, look at that lot, they won't last 5 minutes. But we did, and others didn't. Yeah.
What was your relationship like with the other people in your crew and your plane?
Very good, except in the case of the bomber, Memo, who wrote that book. He was a public school boy, and to him I was a country bumpkin. And it was a love-hate relationship, really. He was a very clever man, and afterwards, of course, we became best of friends. But we all got on, we all worked together, and that was the answer to that.
Do you think that in situations that you're put in like that, any differences get put aside when you know you've got that mission to do?
On one occasion, as we approached the target, the bomb hammer was at the front of the aircraft, and when he was told that the navigation aids weren't happening, so he had to come past me, squeeze past me to go back to the navigator behind me, and in doing so, his equipment turned off some of my petrol cocks. So you can just imagine the reaction there. But on another occasion, he dropped a bomb that got left after we left the target, and he said, "Oh God, we've got a bomb. We got rid of it." So I'm trying to think. Then we then had to fly to a certain part of the North Sea where we could drop unused bombs like that. And we made our way over there. And he said, I'm going to drop this bomb. Which other ones do you want me to drop? Because I have to work out the weight of the aircraft and stability and all that sort of thing. And I said, I nominated a bomb to drop, and off he went. Opened the bomb doors, the rolling bomb fell out, and then he selected for the one which I asked him to bomb. And then, he said, I'll drop the one on. So you can imagine. So he said, well, go on, what do you bloody well want me to do? I said, well, you better do the other one on the other side and balance up. That's the sort of thing you're laughing now when you think about it. Yeah.
The last. Tell them about the last mission. Your last mission.
Yeah.
Last,
Last flight.
yeah. I've got to go back a bit. We had a new fairly new commanding officer, and he was not very popular. And we used to call him the vicar. And he came to my pilot just before we were due to our 40th trip. And he said, I know you're going to do your 40th trip. He said, so I'll do my best to see if I can get you onto an easy flight. Oh, we thought, jolly good, jolly decent, Harry, thanks very much. And so time went on, and then we were due to fly. And as we went to the briefing room for that day, we could see the map of Europe with a red line straight right across where we would go. And what was the target? Essen. One of the worst ones we'd ever been to. The second most heavily defended area in Germany. And we'd had lots and lots on the top of that, and we thought, well, thank you for giving us an easy trip. But in the event, it turned out, and because it was our 40th trip, we were given the honour of leading everybody back in front of all the crews who was on the front.
Wow.
When we got back to the aerodrome, the pilot said, I can't stand this. He said, I've got to wake the boat up. So when instead of flying straight in and landed, he zoomed across the airfield and set up all the, as it turned out, all the big knobs were waiting for it to interverse. And that reminds me that in the last few trips before we finished flying, he'd got an idea he'd like to low fly. Well, on one occasion, we'd stopped a bus. We got people rush off the bus out of the way. We ruined the football match, and we knocked two ladies off a bike. And so we said, no, look, Dick, you must stop this. You can't do this anymore. And he didn't do it. Yeah.
What were the moments for you when you look back now that you were the most scared in specific times?
It was a place called Witten, a railway centre, armament centre, and somehow or other we had been talking about, did the Germans know we were coming on these trips? That's why we had to maintain silence and all that sort of thing. And the story went round that Germans seemed to know we were coming. Now we were told that Witten would be an easy trip, nothing much there. But that turned out the most horrendously defended place we ever came to be. And it was the heaviest losses we've ever had over this place due to the extra defences. And my part in it was that as we were flying away, a piece of flak came right through the window in front of me and ripped my blouse right up. Never did find a piece with me up for it, no. But we got through it, but many didn't.
Was that the closest you ever came?
Well, the closest we had was when we crashed. We were still flying Starlings then, and the pilot had a date to see a WAF, and we were late getting back, and so he was in a bit of a hurry. And so when it come to landing, he overshot a little bit, and we didn't touch down until we were halfway along the runway. By the time we got towards the end, there was a ditch. And of course, the Sterling had very large undercarriage underneath. The wheels dropped down to that, and the rest of the plane shot straight off into that. But we got away with that one. Other occasions we were, we damaged and bits and pieces knocked about and lost engines and all that sort of thing.
How does it feel now? How do you feel now? Excuse me. When you look back on the missions.
I'm proud.
Yeah.
Proud.
Do you think that you obviously you did so much? Do you? We'll get onto this in a little bit, but when you think of now, all the things, the opportunities that have opened up now with the remembrance services and meeting the King.
And that's a complete change of life for me. I came here, both my wife and I were extremely ill, and then she died. And somehow, I got in touch with Dale over that War Memorial business, and it's all gone for there. And it's marvellous. The people who take me under their wings and let me join them and do what I want to do, they can't do enough for me.
You mentioned your wife there. How old were you when you two, going back again, when you two first got together?
About 16 or 17. Yeah.
So you were serving.
Yeah.
Whilst you were
I'd met her before I joined the RAF. Yes.
How would you feel when when you'd go off on missions and she was at home? Was she always someone that you would think about whilst you were flying?
Well, I must say, I don't remember much about that. I mean, that was something I had to do, and when I joined the Air Force, I had no idea what I was going to do when I got in it. But
are you proud of the role that you took on? When you got in and you decided on the engineer role.
What do you think? A 17-year-old in charge of £1 million of Rolls-Royce engines? That's not bad, is it?
That's a really interesting point and something I was going to bring up later, but it leads us on quite nicely now. Throughout the rest of your life, you see, I'm obviously 20. I don't think there is anyone nowadays, 17-year-olds, and you'll probably agree with this with me, Dan. No one now in that sort of age could possibly begin to imagine doing the things that you did at that age.
No, I quite believe that. Yeah.
Do you think that there was just a completely different mentality in the world?
Oh yes, everything has changed completely. It's a different world. There's different. Everybody wore suits and hats and ties, and they didn't do that now, do they? Yeah. Just jeans and these things.
Do you feel like it's when you think back to then in your film now, does it feel like it's been as long as it has been, because it still feels like you can pick out individual moments and individual conversations really clearly?
Well, in doing the actual flying,
yeah.
Oh yes, I remember quite a lot of it. Yes, yeah.
How often does that come into you, or does it ever just find its way into your mind day to day?
Until it was several years after the war that the book was written, and that brought it all back to me then. But even then, after that, nothing really came to my mind until I got involved with Dale and his people, and going around talking to people and telling them a bit about the book and all that sort of thing.
So moving a little bit backwards again, just something I want to pick up before we got too far. We obviously started talking about David, and you said how you then sort of lost contact with each other, going separate ways. When did you find out what had happened to David and where he'd gone?
It was after the war, when I had left the RAF, and I met an old school chum, and he said, "Did you know about David?" And I didn't know.
And what exactly did happen to David?
He was shot down over France. One member of the crew survived. All I know was something to do with New Zealand squadron. It's a different bomb group altogether.
What did, well, park the war side of life for a minute. What did your life look like when the war finished?
I wanted to get a job and I wanted to get married, which I did on both occasions. I wanted to have a family, which I did. And then from on it was just work.
And what was it that you did?
Well, I worked in the legal office and did legal work for a long time.
I think nowadays it feels almost like it's obviously easier to look back on the wars as something of history. But at the time, did it just feel like it was a job that you did at the time, and then you'd moved on to the next job?
There's no question of moving on to the next job. It was just keeping the job.
Yeah.
And I only had the one job.
Did your view of what had happened in the war, did life just go back to normal afterwards for you?
Yes, the people you met at that time just didn't want to know anything about it, and I didn't really want to tell them.
Is that because it was painful to talk about, or?
No,
Just
no,
enough,
I would have talked about it if they wanted to know, but
Yeah.
nobody did.
No. What was your you spoke on touched on the fact that you turned out to be really good friends. What was your relationship like with your crew after the war when you left?
We had about 2 or 3 reunions, only one of which the pilot was able to get to. But after that, I kept in touch with Morris Tripp, the navigator, mostly. I visited Les Walker, the navigator, and his wife, and Harry McKellar. We were friendly with them, but they all eventually got old and died. When you send a Christmas card and somebody write back later, the sorry is also. Yeah.
How does it feel to be one of a few people that are still here to tell the stories of what's happened?
Well, as it's turned out very well for me. So I've got a new life.
Yeah. Talk about that a little bit more. How does it feel like a new lease of life for you? What's come about? How does that feel for you?
Well, I never expected anything like that to happen, and I was pretty miserable when my wife died. But this came up, and I'm a new man.
Well, this came up before that, didn't it?
Yeah.
So I got to meet Eva, didn't I?
Yeah.
And then we were there at that point, weren't we?
That's right.
We were able to bring you through that period.
Do you think that helped you at the time to have Dale and these events?
Oh, I'm sure, because I find myself in a care home surrounded by women who are mostly deaf, and you can't hear them and they can't hear you. So I'm glad to have something else to do besides jigsaw puzzles.
So I want to a little bit more on that stuff, but firstly, are you happy to keep talking? Would you like a break?
No, I'm quite happy. I hope I can find something to tell you.
No, it's absolutely perfect. It's absolutely fascinating. I want to talk about some of the recent stuff that you've done at the moment, and I want you to talk to me about what it was like to meet the King and how all of that came about.
It came about because my daughter's husband worked with a man who used to work on the Bomber Command Memorial Flight. He was in the RAF, but he'd left the RAF, and it turned out that you know what the memorial flight is, as the bomber know, and they were preparing this plane, and he said to Barry, "Well, if you like, I'll get a ticket for you to go so you can see what they're doing to that plane." And so it happened. He said, "Yes, I'll have a ticket and I'll take him." So I went along, and until just 2 days before, I began to twig that there was something going on. And as we arrived at this place, there were crowds and crowds of people, and I thought, goodness me, what's happening? But anyway, I was given a red carpet treatment. It seemed that King Charles had asked to meet veterans like me, and there were 15 of us singled out, and we were all placed on sort of round tables for a tea party. One of these veterans is serving RAF people, and the King, I didn't know about it then. By this time I twigged that it was going to be royalty, but I had no idea what it was. And after a while we were told to stand up and wait, and all went quiet, and they had footsteps approaching us. And I happened to be on the last table that he was going to visit, and suddenly I became aware there was somebody standing there, and because that was him. Shook hands, hello, nice to meet you, and we had a lovely old chat together. Yeah.
How did that feel?
Great, yeah.
That must come into what we were just talking about as something that you never expected.
He was a charming man. I mean, you could talk about anything you liked to him, and he would join in, laughing and joking. Yeah.
Nice to have those almost once in a lifetime opportunities. Absolutely,
yes, yeah. And when I came back and told people where I'd been, they didn't believe me.
Ray is one of the few people alive who's actually been through 4 kings. There's been 3 kings in his lifetime.
That's true, yeah.
Prior to this king.
Yeah. On the table where I was, there was another veteran, 103. DFCs, all sorts of medals and sort of things. And there's me, 98, all talking to the king.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Do you think that, you know, these events that are now coming up, it must feel quite overwhelming at times that you get to do these things?
Yes, I've never experienced anything like that before. Yeah. I've done the police happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you been back to any airfields where you were based, or back to see a bomber since? I've
been back to Chedborough a few times, but we had the odd reunion, but not since not to any others. No.
You've been to Duxford and you've been to Hardwick, haven't you?
Yes, well I didn't fly from there.
You've visited them as bases, haven't you?
Have you? So how many different planes were you in whilst you were flying?
Wellingtons, Stirlings, Lancasters, and the odd one like Tiger Moth. A seaplane I remember was in for a Walrus. And for a time I was an instructor teaching other people to become instructors, and so it meant flying in mostly Lancasters.
Would you say Lancasters are the plane which maybe either your favourite plane or the plane that you've connected with the most?
Certainly a beautiful plane as was. I always told Dale about my favourite plane, HAA April. Yeah.
How do you think you would feel if you have you come up when you went to Duxford or other places? Were there any Lancasters that you there at the time that you've seen since?
In Duxford, there are only bits and pieces of them, not a complete plane.
How do you think it would? How do you ever think that would be if you had the opportunity to go back inside a Lancaster? Would that be something that would ever?
Well, Ray you went inside the Lancaster at Duxford, didn't you?
Yes, and I also went inside one at East Kirby.
Yeah.
How did that feel? To do that?
Well, I was surprised by it. That was a Canadian one, and I couldn't figure out what there was something different about it, and I realise now. A Lancaster had a very long airspan, but you needed a spar to go right through the middle of the aircraft. And so for a little short ass like me, I had to turn around, jump up and sit down on it, straighten my legs over and get into position. And in this particular plane, I looked at that spar and it seemed to be far to me. I thought I'd never ever reach the ground again. Yeah.
Was it quite an emotional thing to step back inside?
Yes, yeah. But they're not the same, of course. Lancaster's got his own smell. And with the Elsan, tell you about the Elsan? I can't remember what trip it was. We were flying JG, and the damn thing wouldn't climb. We couldn't get it up to more than 12,000 feet, and the pilot was shouting and swearing about people not looking after the aircraft and not servicing them properly. One of the things which is wrong with it, his window wouldn't shut quite properly, so there's a draft coming in all the time. And I was suffering from collywobbers. And so the time came, I said, I'm sorry, I've got to go. I've got to go down the end. Now to do that, you have to disconnect from the intercom, you have to disconnect from oxygen, and all your parachute pieces hanging about loose. That's a bit of a job to find your way down with the plane flying around. And by the time I got to the Elsan, got settled, suddenly I plugged in to see what was going on, and they were saying, right, bloody engine's on fire. So come back. So I struggled back. In the end, they weren't really on fire. They just looked as though it was. It was quite a simple job to put right, when there's not too much serious, and I did it. But I always remember the Elsan.
It's amazing how much of all that you've experienced you still vividly remember, and it's things that nowadays are turned into films and TV programs, documentaries, and you lived through that.
When I talk to the lads that I go to with Dale, I try not to do the blood and glory stuff. I like to try the little amusing bits are best.
Yeah. I would obviously imagine there is the darker side of things as still things that stick in your memory.
Oh yes, yeah. They begin to fade now, though, I'll tell you. Yeah.
Can't be a bad thing when it's not a bad thing. So, was there a lot of horrible things that you saw while you were out there?
Well, because we couldn't see very much. You see, we were at 20,000 feet. It's very rarely we were down low enough to see what was going on the ground. Yeah.
Do you think that's an advantage almost for you?
It was one occasion when we had a bomb caught up after the raid, and when we checked up, Mike, the navigator, said, "Oh, there's a bomb stuck." So the pilot said, "Well, come on, get rid of the thing. So find a nice spot if you can." So we looked around to see where there's an open ground. So I like to think that the next morning some farmer, when he's milking his cows, got us a bit of a surprise.
Do you ever, we touched on it a little bit about when we mentioned Dresden. Do you ever, and did you ever think about, what was happening? You were dropping these bombs, and the bombers in the plane dropping the bombs. Did you ever think about where they might be landing, what they might be, who they might be hitting? Was that ever, the thoughts of?
Well, generally speaking, as I say, you were at 20,000 feet,
Yeah.
and not often do you see where they went. All you could see was the smoke and the flames and that sort of thing. And Dresden, of course, was a fire raid, and tremendous fires. And I can see those buildings now, all the buildings red with with the flames coming up. Yeah.
Does that still live in your mind?
Yes. Mm.
Yeah. It's amazing when you hear all the stories. You see films
and that was another experience, see, because that was about as far as we ever flew. We were almost in Russia for that,
Yeah.
And we had to carry a special escape kit with a Union Jack in case we got captured and to show who we were.
Is it ever, it's quite unique, isn't it, in the RAF, in the sense of when you think of the soldiers that were fighting across France or wherever it is, and they're there for months at a time, and you can, like you say about getting back for your Sunday lunch, you can wake up here, you can go and fight, and you can be back here by lunchtime.
Yeah.
Is that almost now is a bit funny to think about, the fact of your involvement being so heavily involved in the fighting, but still being able to.
People always used to ask me, "Why did you have a heavy meal before you flew?" And I said, "Because we didn't know when we'd get another one."
Yeah. Would that be on your head before every time you went in the plane? That fear of not knowing if you'd come back.
Well, that was 17-year-old, so I wouldn't.
Do you think that helps though?
I'm sure if I thought about it more, I would have worried. Yeah. This is why I worried about that first one. That was my first experience.
Yeah. I suppose that the age does help really with that, not overthinking it, doesn't it? That you haven't maybe got if you're a bit older, or you've got children, or there's other things in your life, it might make you view that differently when you go out.
When I was out of the RAF, my son had a business shop run on the Hartsey, on one of the estates, and the man came in. He said, "Oh, I'm having trouble." He said, "Can you help me? I can't get my car started." So I said, "Well, I got my car, I'll come and give you a jump." And so we got it started, and he thanked me and off he went. He said, "You don't remember me, do you?" No. He was with a crew with a man called Warwick, and they, on the first trip, they were shot down into the sea, but they all got rescued. Yeah. Amazing, isn't it?
Didn't Lee last do 5, do a tie-up?
Yeah. I'm at the end now, we're hitting the end now, yeah.
Good, great.
Just to bring it round, back to now, and we'll finish on the you know, where we are today and all of these different things. And you mentioned how you feel proud, and rightly so, of everything that you've done in your life and your service. Do you feel proud now as well of the different accomplishments that you've got in this new chapter of your life, being able to do everything that you're able to do now?
Well, I qualified in a way, and I finished up with a good high-ranking job, so I must have done all right.
And do you know, we sit here now finishing this off, do you, all these different opportunities, does it now give you, you know, moving forward in life at your age, does it give you something to look forward to? You know, the next opportunities that you get to...
I'm looking forward to 22nd of April next year.
Yeah. Big birthday plans.
Plans are afoot.
Right, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute
I hope it's useful for you.
Oh, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. It is crazy when you hear the stories and you think, you've watched the documentaries or the TV programs on this stuff, and you're hearing it firsthand.
Firsthand, isn't it? It's living history.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, and it's one of those things where it's like, I don't think you can understand where, you know, someone from my perspective who's, you know, I'm only 20, I have real interest in it. And you sit there and you say these stories, and you're talking, and you can feel the fact, you know, that Ray's seeing this still in his mind, and it's like I will only ever have the concept of what I can see on a TV screen, of being like, that's what it was like, and then you come and you sit here and you talk to you, and you're like, everything that I've seen on the TV or you hear, that lives inside your head as stuff that you've actually seen.
Dale always likes what's my story about when we diverted to Cornwall, don't you? Strasbourg, I think it was, we went to, and we lost an engine, and on the way back we received a message, East Anglia is fogged out, you can't go back to the UK. And so we were diverted, and we were diverted to a place called St Evil in Cornwall. Of course, nobody had ever heard any about it. But it so happened that we lost an engine, and that meant we were falling behind all the rest. And so we remember that I was about 40 aircraft, all aiming to get back somewhere different, and we were got struggled around to find and get there. And what happened was, we were so prone to air attacks from fighters, that's all around, you see. And a Mustang came and flew right alongside us, American Mustang. And it's a gorgeous man.
It's amazing. Stories are absolutely amazing, Ray. It's unbelievable. Thank you so much for talking to me as well. Like I was saying to you, you know.
Well, I hope you found it worthwhile.